Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with lush vegetation all around, kids playing in between wooden cottages. Next, we see a battle zone in 1941, in the midst of World War II, soldiers strolling and tanks circling around. A soldier is directing his partner to seek cover as he targets the enemy. Suddenly, the enemy attacks the tank and attempts to set it on fire. The soldiers inside the tank attempt to escape by moving backwards, but the enemy keeps attacking, so they eventually roll over the tank through enemy artillery. Switching to an army barracks, where soldiers are receiving treatment and a guy is lying on a bed seeing people around him. Suddenly, the nurse notices that the man is awake and informs the doctor, asking him to take a nap. The guy asks the nurse about the other troops. She assures him that everything will be okay, and someone arrives to look for Lieutenant Gaponkenko. Next, the soldiers are being transported from the camp to their designated locations. While doing so, they come across other soldiers who are searching for the 12th Rifle Division. The captain asks the lieutenant about them and gets no response. He also asks the soldiers seated behind him about them, but no one knows. The captain advises the lieutenant to take care of himself, because there are still a lot of Krauts in the war zone. The troops are attempting to free the truck, as it becomes bogged in the mud and snow. One of the soldiers advises the other lieutenant to seek assistance from the residents of the surrounding village, since they might have horses. The lieutenant inquired about the soldier's identity. Addressing him as Senior Sergeant Kalashnikov, they both make their way to the hamlet in search of assistance. Kalashnikov questions the lieutenant about the gun's dependability in combat while traveling to the settlement. When they arrive at the settlement, the lieutenant hands Kalashnikov a gun, so he may guard him from behind, and tells him to stay 50 meters away. A wooden home is suddenly attacked by two opponents, who engage in a firefight. The lieutenant is injured when his gun jams, and Kalashnikov arrives to tend to him, as they converse about the new weapon. Subsequently, an elderly gentleman hoists the pair upon a horse and cart, as Kalashnikov informs the lieutenant about the shortcomings in the newly acquired firearm, that caused it to jam. Additionally, Kalashnikov shares that, being a naturally curious person, he constructed a foot-trap dryer out of a campfire. They finally manage to free their car from the snow, and begin their journey with the aid of a horse and the elderly. Kalashnikov writes a letter to his loved ones, explaining that his tank was damaged during the battle, killing all of the crew members, but he managed to escape with only a shoulder wound. Since then, he has been receiving medical attention in the hospital, and the doctors have advised him to remain on leave, and return home until his wound has healed completely. Next, Kalashnikov is returning home on a train, where he meets other soldiers. He strikes up a conversation with one of them, and tells him about a place called Matai, in Kazakhstan, where he used to work. He also shares his childhood passion of making things, like shotguns and crossboards, and that he is currently considering creating an automatic machine gun, showing him a sketch of it. The other soldier encourages him to proceed, as the country needs it. Subsequently, Kalashnikov is dreaming of his early years, and how he used to produce shotguns. Suddenly, the train stops at the Matai station, and he leaps off. He apologizes to his mother in a letter, warning her that he would lose his respect if he returns home in this manner. Kalashnikov is at the steam engine servicing station, talking to his ex-boss Andrzej. He informs him that he used to work here before the war, and is on leave to recuperate, but the boss sternly instructs him to go, because there isn't any job for him right now. He was dismissed for using the depot's workshop to build his private weapon designs. He appeals to his former superior, Krotov, to let him assemble his latest invention, but the superior responds negatively and asks him to leave his office. Next, Kalashnikov is sitting at the Matai station, when he runs into a high-ranking inspector, Basurov, and requests to share his idea. Kalashnikov outlines his plan to improve the machine guns, and receives approval to proceed with it. With the letter of reference in hand, the sergeant approaches his former supervisor Andrzej. With limited resources, Andrzej grants his request, and he begins working on the project. Subsequently, he pleads with Andrzej for additional personnel to finish the assignment, but is declined, informing him that Basurov's proposal was made out of sympathy for him, since he is a wounded soldier. After that, we find Kalashnikov working alone. Several of his colleagues, who are experts in various fields, pay him a visit, and say they would be happy to assist during off-peak hours. Kalashnikov explains his needs, and everyone gladly complies. In a letter to his mother, he says he cannot be doing this without the kind individuals who are assisting him in creating the automated machine gun. And since he is working for his country, everything he does is top secret. Kalashnikov is seen laboriously with his associates to construct an automatic firearm, and successfully test it. Subsequently, he takes this gun to the high-ranking inspector, in order to get it commissioned, but upon arriving at the office, he learns that the high-ranking inspector has been replaced by a new one. Kalashnikov informs the official that this is a matter of national importance, and that he must meet the inspector. He even shows the inspector the gun. However, the officer arrests him for this. Next, a new high-ranking inspector stops by. He comments that the gun is pretty fascinating, and homemade, and he tells the other officer that he will return the next day to investigate the situation further. He orders an officer to send the gun for testing after he takes it with him. A cop is testing the gun at the range. They find it to be dependable, are impressed by it, and want to know who made it. As this is going on, security guards are making fun of Kalashnikov, and telling him it's hard for him to be an inventor, since he lives in a tiny town. Suddenly, an inspector arrives, demands that the officer release the man, and calls him inventor Kalashnikov. In addition to telling Kalashnikov about the all-union weapon design contest, which he must win to get his gun commissioned, the high-rank inspector advises him to make the necessary weight adjustments. They also promise to make the necessary changes, and present them to the commander of the Central Asian Military District, who will facilitate his participation in the contest, if he agrees. The next morning, Kalashnikov meets with the commander general, and explains the gun's specifications. After they test the weapon together, the commander informs him that he will now serve as their military district's equipment engineer, and he will be providing a personal recommendation letter for him to compete in the National Arms Design Contest. The officers applaud Kalashnikov's idea, and once more, he writes his mother a letter, expressing his desire to visit, but emphasizing his increased duty to the country. In Moscow in 1943, he is traveling to the Shurovsky range in a shared car with another inventor. The officer seated next to him notices the gun he is carrying, and pulls it out. Kalashnikov begins explaining its features to him, telling him that if he wins, he will give him the best Armenian cognac. Kalashnikov makes a visit to the testing range, where he meets with the colonel, and gives him the letter of reference stating that he needs to be given the appropriate direction, to finish his work as a firearms designer. The colonel informs him that this advice is very important over here, and that test grounds will be his classroom. The captain is introduced to him by the colonel. Subsequently, the captain showcases the workspaces of all renowned innovators in attendance, and Kalashnikov will be pitted against them. He leads him inside his workshop, and instructs him to finish the gun's technical designs. Then he heads to the mess, where he runs into Katya, a girl who informs him that the captain has requested her to assist him with some technical drawings, on the condition that he refrain from making any advances towards her. She instructs him to meet at 8:30 tomorrow morning. The girl unexpectedly shows up at the scheduled time, and begins working on the technical design of the gun. The next morning, he goes to the Shurovsky test range, where he meets the major, and observes the crew of renowned inventor Degtyaryov. He returns to his workshop to continue working on his gun. Later, Kalashnikov exits the workshop, and stands outside the window to observe Katya at work. He expresses gratitude to the girl for her assistance with the technical drawing of the weapon, and requests permission to drop her home in the evening. When they observe couples dancing on the way back, the girl expresses interest in it. A lieutenant dances with her, and offers to take her home, but Kalashnikov becomes enraged, and drags the girl home with him. She tells him that she has a daughter, but no spouse, and wishes him luck for the next day. The next day, Kalashnikov finds out he lost the competition, and congratulates Major Alexei Sudayev on winning. Major Alexei tells Kalashnikov not to be discouraged, since one day he would undoubtedly be able to showcase his skill. After that, he meets with the colonel, who advises him to continue working, because he has already made so much progress in the race. He gives the captain a call, and requests that he inform Kalashnikov of the new task. The captain informs him that the upcoming competition will include a new light submachine gun, and requests that he return to Kazakhstan to continue working on it. In 1944, Kalashnikov returns to his place of employment from Kazakhstan. He meets the general, who informs him that a great deal is at risk this time, and many resources will be needed. He begins focusing on and passing the next assignment's test. He gets a letter from a female who assisted him with technical drawings, telling him to finish working on his submachine gun, so that he may see her. An officer approaches to take Kalashnikov, who calls his younger brother on another train, inquires about his mother and sister. He remarks that he is not as fortunate as Kalashnikov. Kalashnikov, on the other hand, stays silent, and has tears in his eyes. When the officer approaches and asks about his brother, he declines to talk to them. An officer tells Kalashnikov to have a drink, and warns him that staying at home is difficult, and that ideological opponents pose a greater threat than the Nazis, since they will stab him in the back. Next, Kalashnikov goes to see Katya. It's pouring severely, and they're having a nice time together. Subsequently, Kalashnikov has a heartbreaking failure in the competition once more. He visits the doctor, asking him to give approval to let him go on, but the doctor refuses. When an officer approaches to inquire about the doctor's response, he tells Kalashnikov that his light submachine has potential, and he may remain there to work on it, since everyone believes in him. The issue is, did he believe in himself? Kalashnikov then contemplates what his life would have been like if he hadn't stopped at Matai Station, and commits to memory how he used to construct shotguns as a boy. Kalashnikov meets Katya's mother, who asks him questions, and he gives a marriage proposal to her. The next morning, there is a victory announcement, which makes all the residents joyful, as they all begin to sing and dance. Kalashnikov, however, is not very pleased, because he knows that the machine gun will no longer be required. They both chuckle when Katya offers him to build an electric meat grinder that would be helpful in every home. The next morning, Kalashnikov asks the colonel, "Is this the end of all his hard work?" The colonel tells him to continue working in his own section, and he eagerly returns to his prior task. An officer approaches him, explaining the flaw in the design, and how it may be a simple tool. The officer also tells him that a competition for a new rifle will take place next month. Kalashnikov travels to the Kovrov Guns plant for a year. The facility is controlled by General Degtyaryov, the rival, and as such, he is quite anxious, since he is uncertain if he will have the backing he needs to work on his proposal. He gets encouragement from Katya, who calls him the best. In 1947, Kalashnikov visits the factory. There, he meets Zaitsev, one of his co-workers. He informs Kalashnikov about the treatment he receives there, but Kalashnikov is unconcerned. Later, he sees Degtyaryov, and they begin talking. Afterwards, he gets to work on his task, and writes Katya a letter, saying everything is going well, and the officer was correct to say that everything should be easy to understand. He also writes that he is eager to test the first batch of his creation. The next day, Kalashnikov makes the decision to test his gun at the testing range, where prototypes from Degtyaryov are already being tested, but an officer sends him away, since Degtyaryov's gun is being tested today. He then goes to the vice president to ask for permission to test, but he only receives a slot after 2 days. He asks for permission elsewhere, but he is denied, since carrying a gun outside the building is prohibited. He requests the bullets from Alexander, and begins to test his gun. A cop tries to stop him when he hears gunfire, but he doesn't, and he is arrested. Nevertheless, he appears content after testing his weapon. After that, an officer brings him to Degtyaryov, who tells Kalashnikov that he recalls him and his homemade gun, lets him sit, and states that he would not steal his invention, but is interested in examining his weapon, before it is put through its paces at the testing range. Degtyaryov follows him to witness his creation, and claims that Kalashnikov's idea is superior to his own, and that testing should proceed. When Kalashnikov returns the next morning after passing the tests, he learns that Katya is pregnant, and he is overjoyed to hear this. In 1949, Chief Marshal of the Artillery, Voronov arrives. Kalashnikov is congratulated by everybody. Voronov informs Kalashnikov that now is the right moment for him to become an officer, and improve his rank. When the marshal asks him when he last visited his house and instructs him to go there, Kalashnikov responds that he has a lot of things to do. Then the marshal brings him to the regiment, and introduces Kalashnikov as a young inventor who won the Stalin Prize, and created a new rifle for them, the AK-47, which is the weapon of the future, and says, "Thank you." After congratulating Kalashnikov, Marshal grants him an extended leave, which he uses to visit his mother at his home farm, along with his wife and kids. His invention creates history. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.